Hi, what I have here is the old style Thumper massager, part number 1000. Had it for years. It's broken down a few times and I fixed it. I was kind of surprised I went on YouTube and there were no videos on how to repair these at all. I've had this apart probably 4, 5, 6 times throughout the years. So I figured I'd just do a short video and kind of share some of the stuff I learned on here. First thing that usually goes bad on these is the drive assembly here. There's a seal bearing. Here's an extra one I have. There's a seal bearing in here. You don't need to loop it at all. There's a rubber donut or whatever that goes on the bottom down here. And there's a set screw that goes in here. Make sure you have a 1/2 inch long set screw. One of the ones I had was half this length, and it gives you less space for the Loctite to dry up, so you're better off to have the 1/2 inch, the long one like this. It uses an 1/8 inch hex key on there. Use red Loctite, not blue. If you have to take it apart down the road and you start torquing on it, doesn't want to come loose, then take a heat gun like the $12 Harbor Freight one here and just heat that up and it'll come right out. Just make sure you don't heat up the bearing too much here, and this is plastic here, so be careful you don't melt that. Just apply the heat where the set screw is or on the shaft behind it if you can get to that easily. The gap setting between the counterweight and the motor right here is 85 thousandths. It's easier to use paper like this than feeler gauges. So just take some calipers and measure it. I would go a little bit more than 85 because once you tap this into place, it's probably going to be tight, and so I would go like 95, and then after you pull it out, it'll probably be right at 85. It's not that critical. It can be off a little bit. It doesn't have to be exactly 85. When you tap on this, don't beat on it with the hammer. I'm on a glass table right now, so don't work on a glass table if you're hammering on stuff. And if you're in the house using the kitchen table, put a piece of cardboard down. Your wife will appreciate that. Anyway, you can probably tap on here without hurting anything if you don't beat on it real hard. You can tap on the counterweight piece. I just happen to have an automotive tool. It was made for a diesel engine that fit right on there that I could just tap on that, and that worked okay. Backing up, I have nothing to do with the Thumper company. I do not work on small appliances. I'm a muscle car guy. This is the first video I've ever done on something that's not car related, but I've learned quite a bit all the times I've had this thing apart. So, and the information's not out there, so it's worth fixing. This drive assembly you can still buy from Thumper for $70. At least it was $70 2 years ago, and they pay for shipping. They're based out of Ontario, Canada. They're real good at responding to emails and stuff, most of the time. Well, all the time they're real good at answering emails. Last one I sent them, I wasn't real happy with the answer though. What I asked was, what was the torque on this nut? This bolt goes all the way through the frame that holds the motor where it attaches to the massager. This bolt goes all the way through, and there's a nut on here, and their answer was tighten it down until you see 4 threads exposed. That's not a torque value. You can buy 100 bolts and they're all going to be a different length. I have a nylock nut on here and a lock washer, which I don't know if it came that way when the unit was brand new. Nylock nuts are longer. Lock washer is going to change that measurement. So 4 threads showing is not a valid torque number. So anyway, I just went kind of tight on it, not super tight, just kind of snug and a little bit more. And on that rubber gasket in there, you can just spray a couple drops of PB Blaster or WD-40 on there, Not a whole bunch, just a little bit to help out there. The fan on the end here is really fragile and easy to break. I just replaced the motor. Here's my original one. Thumper does not sell a replacement motor. I picked up the new one on eBay, barely used, for $30. Came with the fan. Asked the lady to pack it real well. She didn't pack it real good, and opened up the box, and the blade was broken off on here. And then when I went to install my blade onto this one, I put a socket on there and tapped it lightly and cracked it. You probably don't need a socket. You can just push it on by hand, I think. But if you do crack the plastic here, just put some JB weld on both sides. There's not a lot of stress on here. It's not going to come apart or anything. That's better than trying to track down another fan. This measurement's not real critical on how much is exposed here. Just make sure, turn it, make sure it doesn't hit your nuts or bolts or studs coming off the motor. This Thumper has a lot of miles on it. A while back there was 3 cracks on the frame that I had welded up. It was broken here. Bolt probably loosened, a nut probably loosened up, got things to vibrate too much, and it was broken here, cracked here, cracked there. So I had that all welded up. One thing I recommend, I don't know if it comes this way or not, is putting a flat washer and a lock washer behind your nuts. That way it's not gonna they're not gonna loosen up on you at all. Let's see, what else? Well, if you look at the my old unit here, you can see where the set screw loosened up or whatever and kind of messed up the shaft a little bit. So inspect your shaft, and if there's any grooves you can feel with your fingernail, then you need to sand that down. This flat surface where the set screw sits is not real flat. You can take a file to that, kind of flatten that off. When you put your set screw down, use red Loctite, not blue Loctite. And let it sit for 24 hours before you use the machine. Once you have it all back together like this, then I would recommend running it for 45 minutes or an hour on a cushion. Make sure you don't have any kids or cats or dogs around. You don't want them to get their fingers stuck in here on the fan or anything. Someone can get hurt. So anyway, run it for 45 minutes or an hour, and then recheck your measurement with your paper feeler gauge. Make sure that didn't loosen up and change at all. Make sure you're still good there, and then you can put your unit back together. This time I had it apart, I changed the switch. The original switch was a million years old, you can easily spend a couple hours on eBay trying to find the right switch, 2-pole with the right measurements. And a lot of the switches, they don't even give you the measurements on them. I got lucky. I went to Home Depot, they didn't have anything. I went to Lowe's, and they had one that almost works perfectly. $5.50. The same thing online was like $1.50, with the shipping was like $6.99, and it was going to take like a week to get here from Minnesota. This one here from Lowe's was $5.50. The only thing I had to modify on it was the little spring tab, or whatever you call it, on here. On the one side I cut it off, and then that way it fits in there just right. It's a tiny bit wider this way, which is no big deal. It still fits in there good. But with the one spring-loaded tab, or whatever you call that thing, chopped off, this fits in there perfectly and nice and tight. And it says on/off on it, versus the original one just had the red thing when it's on. Let's see, what else did I do here? When you're putting it back, if you have to change any connectors on your switch here, use the heat shrink connectors on there. And if you have to add any wire, I like using these solderless connectors with the heat gun. You just apply the heat on there and it melts the solder, and it's a heat shrink on each end. That's never going to come loose or anything from all that vibration. Also on the wires here, might be overkill, but I took some liquid electrical tape. Put electrical tape, it's going to come off, but this was liquid electrical tape. You can buy this at Harbor Freight for like $5 a bottle. Anyway, put that on the wires. That way if things are wiggling around, there's less chance of exposing to the metal and shorting something out. So it's just extra insurance and only takes a few extra minutes. Let's see, covered that. When you're assembling your two halves back together, do not tighten them down. Leave your screws just kind of snug until you get both sides on. Make sure everything goes together right and completely goes together. Don't force it. If there's a gap there, don't force it with the screws. You know, get things together all the way before you start tightening up any of the screws at all. Since this one has a lot of miles on it, some of the screw holes here got bigger, so I just used a washer. Just used a washer on each one there to apply the right pressure. And also for extra insurance, once it's all back together on the surfaces where it goes together here and on the handle, I put black duct tape on there just for extra insurance on all the spots where it goes together. The replacement plug I changed years ago. It's just kind of a generic type thing. A lot of times it comes loose. A lot of times it'll come loose on you. So what I just kind of figured out, well, first of all, if you're using an extension cord with the 2 prongs, then put your grounding plug, your 3 to 2 prong adapter on here. Put some electrical tape on there so you don't have to look for that every time. That way it's always on there. But if this comes loose on you, what I did was just put a tie strap around one side and a tie strap along the handle part here, and then tighten them up together, and then put the black duct tape around there so you're not scratching your fingers when you have them on there, and it'll never come loose if you do that. Oh, one thing real important is when you have this shaft, the drive assembly off, the part that's flat, wrong end. Okay, the part that's flat for the set screw to set on, once you have that into place, you can't tell if the flat is lined up with where the set screw goes because you can't see it anymore. Figures the phone would ring when I'm doing the video. Anyway, so what you need to do is take like a red Sharpie felt pen and put a dot on the center of the flat part. Put a dot right in there. Okay, right there. Put a red dot there. When I was putting this together, the drive assembly was like most of the way on, and I couldn't get the felt pen in there, so I just took some red paint, spray paint, and used a chopstick on there and just got a little red dot of paint and let it dry. That way when you're putting it all together and getting assembled, you can make sure that the set screw is lined up with that red dot. So when you're tightening it down, you're tightening down on the flat, not on the round. If you tighten down on the round, you're going to have problems for sure. When you're installing a drive assembly, do not hold the fan blade here. It's not pressed on that tight, it's just going to turn on you anyway. So take some needle nose vice grips and just clamp on the shaft right here. It doesn't matter if you mess that up a little bit because nothing rides on there anyway. So you can just clamp on that, and that way you can wiggle that around if you need to line up the the set screw with the flat part on the shaft there. Here's the measurements on the openings on the for the switch. Opening is 0.530 on the width. The length is 1.040, and the original switch that was in there, the width is 0.469. The length without the little tang pieces, whatever you call them, was 0.892. This was the one I was ready to order from Minnesota, but would have taken a week to get here. And it looks like I would have had to modify it a little bit anyway, because it was a little bit longer. Rumor has it that this old style Thumper works as good or better than the new ones they make. I've never used the newer one, so I can't say that from personal experience. Also, I'm not affiliated with Thumper whatsoever. I don't work on small appliances. I'm a muscle car guy. I've got experience building high performance car parts, and I'll be the first to admit I'm not real good with electrical stuff. But just trying to use some common sense here on putting this together and making it reliable so it doesn't come apart again. Let's see if I have anything else on my list. Oh, the original motor was 1550 RPM, and the replacement one that I got is 1650. I don't think it makes any difference, 100 RPM. All the shaft sizes and everything lined up. And this one had low mileage on it. I bought on eBay with the drive assembly, with the fan that came out to have a broken blade once it arrived, but still, that was a good deal for $30. After letting the red Loctite on the set screw dry for 24 hours, go ahead and plug it in, put it on a cushion or something so it's not bouncing all over the place. Like I said, I'd run it for 45 minutes or an hour, and then double check, make sure nothing loosened up, make sure your setting is still correct from the counterweight to the motor face. By the way, I don't work on stuff like this, so if you have a broken one, do not call me to work on yours. Also, feel free to leave a comment if I left anything off, if you have any suggestions, or if you learned anything. If you learned anything from the video, click the like button, and hope I helped you out. A couple more things. If your motor's bad, it's going to be hard to find one out there that's the right RPM, shaft coming out both sides with the round on that side and the flat on this side and the 4 studs in the right position. I spent time looking and I couldn't find anything. So if you need a motor, I would suggest eBay. Try to find one with low mileage on it. Also, the main bolt that goes through the center that I talked about earlier with the nylock nut. The reason for the nylock nut and the lock washer is you're not torquing the bolt really tight and you don't want it loosening up. So a combination of the lock washer and the nylock nut with the low torque setting, it's not going to loosen up on you and cause a problem. Also, if you don't want to put black tape here along the crack, you can take some black silicone or caulking or something and run it on there, or leave it the way it is. And last thing is, the switch turned out to be upside down from the way I wanted it. I wanted to have on there and off that way. But the way the 2 prongs came out and with the longer heat shrink fittings on there, there was more clearance to flip it this way. So anyway, it's labeled on and off, no big deal, but I had to flip it upside down. And I guess that's it. And to keep the electrical strap on, I put a tie strap here, and then one through the whole deal here. Tighten it up, get that tight, and then put some black duct tape on there. That'll keep that from falling out. And with the black duct tape, it's not going to look ugly. And there's a close-up of the fender washer I used, since the plastic was broken and the hole was bigger. Here's the finished product. You have the black duct tape on there. Wrapped it around the handle right here, especially since I had a couple screws here that were sticking out. Tape that up. Ready to go.